Can you throw the break, please? Oh, I didn't know that we was already in the break. Apologies.
Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to FANTI, the podcast for all those complex and complicado conversations about the gray areas in our lives. I am trying to stay awake. I don't know what it is. All of us were dragging this morning. Jarrett Hill.
Well, listen, I'm not dragging no more. I got all the energy. I don't know what you were talking about. I am Tre'vell Anderson.
This is where we put in the candy clip of the lies, the lies, the lies.
Whatever, child. You know, when they say action, you got to jump into, you got to turn it on. But go ahead. What's coming up on the show?
Coming up on the show this week, we are getting into the new Issa Rae movie that just hit theaters last weekend.
Screaming.
Called Barbie. We're going to get into the good, the bad, and the white woman of Barbie in just a little bit. But up first, we want to talk a little bit about Hollywood on strike. This is something that has been irking me for a while. Obviously, we've been in the writer strike that began May 2nd.
Oh, wow. You start off bad. I said you start off the topic bad. You say I've been irked.
I've been irked about this, and you know as well as anyone how I've been feeling about this writer strike that has now become a double strike with SAG-AFTRA joining it a couple of weeks ago now, by the time y'all are hearing this. And so I've been frustrated about this from various different perspectives. I should say, for those of you that are not familiar with what SAG-AFTRA is, or you might see the SAG Awards, SAG-AFTRA is a Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists.
Oh, they know what it is.
I feel like what's important there is like there's a bit of a distinction in the SAG-AFTRA strike on the SAG side versus the AFTRA side. AFTRA was its own union for a long time before joining forces with SAG to become SAG-AFTRA. But the AFTRA side is often people who are hosts, radio and television personalities, journalists, etc. And so there's an interesting element of this strike where like the folks that are on that side of the coin are not necessarily impacted the same way as the folks on the Screen Actors Guild side that have streaming contracts with acting and writing and performance and all of those different kinds of things. And so this strike has been interesting to me because over the course of a number of years, we've seen so many different conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion happening in Hollywood. We've seen, Oscars So White. We've seen the major air quote reckoning that Tre'vell and I always kind of roll our eyes at, and many other people as well. We've seen, such an influx in more and more representation that has been important and valuable and, impactful in the ways that we really appreciate and are grateful for. But I've also seen that in all of these different unions and guilds that are going to these streamers to negotiate their deals, none of them have like significant language about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which says to me that like it wasn't as high a priority as they said it was, and that it's not going to be as high a priority as we move forward. Past this strike, whatever that should be, but it also implies to me like we're going to have to be a lot more vigilant in a lot of different ways. Something I think that's important to understanding that, Tre'vell, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum on camera and off camera, and like we've talked. I started writing something that I felt like was too long and didn't have like a right place for it, and I sent it to you, and you were like, girl, you got to cut this down. This is way too much. But like, how are you thinking about the strike? How are you thinking about what's happening kind of industry wide? And what are your expectations?
I mean, pay the people their money. It's really that simple. Let's go to the board. If you know, you know. I mean, so I'm not a member of either of these unions. I also don't really have, like intentional aspirations to join either of those unions and do the work, right? The type of work that's necessary to join those types of unions. And so for me, I've been given very, my name is Bennett and I ain't in it energy. Like, y'all say we striking. You don't want me to retweet the post? I won't retweet the post. Like, whatever y'all say goes in my eyes, right? That being said, I also think that, like, it is this interesting conversation. You brought up the DEI part of this conversation. You're not the only person who I've heard, use that aspect that, like, DEI doesn't seem to be, at least from what I can tell, a major negotiation point. But also the broader happenings in the industry where, right, we've seen, I think it's 4 Black women DEI positions at the different studios. They've either left or got laid off or whatever over the last couple months or so. We know that a number of DE&I initiatives, right, are often the first ones to get shrunk or disappear at across industries, to be clear. Whenever, a business or a company begins to have whatever they say are, financial troubles, right? But for me, it's always interesting because I hear that concern, and I'm also saying and seeing, right, that some of the loudest voices that I'm seeing on my timeline, right, in my news consumption are folks of color, right? They're Black folks, to be specific, black women and femmes, to be even more specific. And so, like, I just watched a video on TikTok of the Black girl who has the distinct features that we used to watch. She was a child star, and she was a little Black girl. She was on the third Bring It On, I think it was the one with Solange. The Bring It On with Solange.
I knew you were gonna give me an example that was not going to be helpful at all for me, and you've delivered on that.
Listen, the girls who know, they know. But anyway, she played one of the supporting characters, one of the, Chandrika type characters in alongside Solange in that movie. But she was a child star, and I just saw this TikTok of her literally boo-hoo-hooing down, right, about the need for the strike, about the problem with the residuals, and being somebody who is famous because people see her on TV, but like having to have 2 jobs so that she can, pay her bills and take care of her responsibilities. And so to hear the concern that you laid out, and then to also see these Black women in films be some of the loudest voices and, both on the picket line and on social media, I'm like, well, come on now. And so, again, for me, it's just like, how can I, support and amplify from my stance and my vantage point, as a journalist, as somebody who's like, engaged in this industry in the ways that I'm engaged in this industry. But really, I think it was Variety did a story, and they anonymously interviewed somebody. It might have been Hollywood Reporter, but they anonymously interviewed somebody, and the executive was basically saying, like, we gonna draw this out until the writers, lose their houses and stuff like that and can't pay their bills. And like, these executives, mind you, are, making hundreds of millions of dollars per year, and
have been for years,
right? And to say that type of thing, one, you said it anonymously because you would never come out of your mouth and say that directly to people, right? But also, like, that just goes to show kind of the pervasiveness of their greed and their lack of care. And so, if that means that the writers and the actors are on the outs for however long that y'all need to be out on the outs to get what y'all need to provide me my Black excellence and my white excellence on television and on film.
First of all, the idea of providing me my white excellence, I'm just going to sit with that in my spirit for a little bit.
Have you seen Hacks?
I'm not doing this with you. And yes.
I'm just saying.
You said white excellence, baby. White excellence. The writing is just
entertaining.
Yes. You said the white people have a moment right now with that. Well, I think what's important though, like, and even as we're talking about like television, right, and like what we're watching and seeing and what we will and won't be able to see, I think that like people at home are going to start to feel it next year. I was reading a story that was talking about the ways that had like a bit of a grid, if you will, that kind of showed like where different shows are in this process. Variety has a really fantastic article about this, and they were talking about all of the many different shows that are in production and on hold right now. And as I'm thinking about the excellence excellence that I want to see come back, I'm like, oh, some of the white excellence that I loved is gone too. Like, I've been waiting on Severance to come back with season 2.
And the black excellence, P-Valley. We not gonna get no P-Valley. We not gonna get no Abbott Elementary.
Well,
we're not gonna get, and I'm gonna say Giovanni Samuels was her name.
Yes.
Giovanni Samuels.
Thank you, Palmyra. We are waiting on new seasons of all kinds of different shows, right? But we're also kind of in this place of like peak TV being over. If you're not familiar with peak TV is this language that we've used for a number of years now about the growth of television and being able to see so much more television shows than we've ever had before because of the explosion of cable and then streaming more specifically. And I think what's interesting with peak TV being over is like peak TV gave us the opportunity to have so many more shows, and a little bit more proportionally, but like there was just so many more shows on television. For example, in 2002, there were 182 original scripted television shows on television. 2002, 182 shows. In 2012, 10 years later, that had grown from 182 to 288, about 100 shows. By 2022, that had grown to 599. We've seen a huge explosion in television, being able to see more shows, more streaming, more things on Netflix and Disney Plus and all of the different places. And like, that is over now, right? Like, we are starting to see those numbers. Those numbers are going to be receding. So we're going to see less shows made, which means we are going to see less and less like diverse shows made. Because as you talked about, the executives, we saw that day where there were 4 different black female executives that were either laid off or fired or left their jobs or whatever. And that was more than a month ago, right? You and I know black film and television executives who have been laid off, lost their job, or for other reasons are not where they were anymore, whether they are executives, whether they're creatives, whether they're writers, whether they're directors, all of these different things, right? And like, we're going to start seeing that impact on television next year. And like, I do not predict it is going to be good. I think we're going to continue to see our numbers fall because we're going to see less and less black executives. If you look at the Hollywood Diversity Report, they talk about how we've seen a lot of growth in the number of people of color that we're seeing on screen, but a lot of that is attributed to the fact that we've had a lot more black and brown executives and, you know, people from marginalized communities in roles of leadership. And a lot of those roles are leaving, right? And so like, this is concerning to me in a lot of different ways, but also thinking about like, this is even bigger than the entertainment industry. I think that there's this idea that people that live in LA and work in film and television are, you know, everyone's doing well out here. We're all making tons of money. And like, that has just never been the case. And I think that as we're looking at this strike, you know, kind of as a microcosm, we also see this happening in other industries where after the Great Resignation, you know, that we saw through the pandemic, and now we're seeing like UPS, for instance. UPS has 340,000 workers that are poised to be going on strike here at the end of July if their deal is not worked out, asking for simple things. They want air conditioners in their trucks. They want better wages, right? They want like various things that are simple, basic needs. We see pilots that are prospectively getting ready to strike, and like, we see this happening all over the place, and it's concerning to me. I'm really curious about where we're going right now.
First off, on the point about what you have articulated is basically this like rise in striking and unionizing. That's been happening for, you know, 4 or 5 years in small ways. You know, it's been building, I should say, over the last 4 to 5 years. Shout out to my coverage on What a Day. But I do think, I wanted to say that I want to also note, as it relates to this conversation, and then we can throw it a break, is, you know, a lot of people have been losing their jobs. It's not just the like DEI folks, right?
Sure.
You mentioned executives, right, have lost their jobs, right, due to a lot of the merging and the reshuffling and the restructuring. I just really wanted to note specifically, like, let's also not act like these DE and I roles at these companies, you know, most of them like actually came with any legitimate power. And but by which I mean, right, We know the ways in which Black folks, right, particularly over the last 3 years, have been brought into all of these companies across industries to basically just be Black faces of white institutions, right? And them not getting the actual power, the actual influence, the actual, control, right, of these particular things. And so what I would add to the point that you're making in this like broader industry regard is that we should have never thought that having people in these positions would be, the end all be all. I am interested to see how this moment impacts what we see next on TV, because the reality is, more diverse products and cultural productions make more money than the all-white stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, that is information and data that we have had for decades, but we are currently in a moment in which they are, reparroting it and reasserting it in various different ways. I don't know where I was going with that thought, so I would just leave it there and let it trail off and say, we're going to take a quick break.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into Barbie and what we thought about the movie and the entire moment that is happening right now for everyone's blonde bombshell. Oh, and now Tre'vell singing. Go, 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 go.
Summer is in full swing, okay? And hopefully that means that cookouts and dinner parties are on the way, okay? Always be ready with a freezer full of fresh, ready-to-bake, delicious options from Wild Grain. Wild Grain is the first ever bake-from-frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, fresh pastas, and artisanal pastries. You'll never run the risk of getting bored with Wild Grain because they're constantly, adding new things. They got seasonal items. They got limited time special items. Everything that you can try, okay? And every item bakes from frozen in 25 minutes or less. I made this red pasta sauce. It's like, tomato sauce the other night, and I used the Wild Grain fettuccine pasta that it's frozen, and then you just drop it in the pot and you just boil it. It's really good, if I do say so myself.
I love, for the closed captioning folks, spelling fettuccine. That's going to be fun.
Fettuccine.
I'm a meal prep person. I love meal prep, and it's really helpful for me. And I don't do it every week, but what I've really enjoyed about Wild Grain is that being able to have a delicious loaf of bread that is already just freshly baked, that is on my counter, or having croissants, or even the little desserts that they have are also really, really delicious. For a limited time, you can get $30 off your first box plus free croissants in every box, which is all me, right? Go to wildgrain.com/FANTI to start your subscription. You heard me. Free croissants every box and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/FANTI. That's wildgrain.com/FANTI, or you can use promo code FANTI at checkout.
Welcome back, beautiful people. That is a breaking news alert.
Is that the ticker tape happening? What's going on?
That is It's a breaking news alert. I just wanted to bring the people some breaking news as we are recording this. You mentioned earlier before the break that about the UPS workers, potentially going on strike. And I've got a breaking news alert here from The Times that UPS has reached a tentative deal on a contract with the union representing more than 325,000 workers, a key step in averting a potential strike. So just wanted to up the date,
What happened to solidarity?
Wow.
What happened to... No, I'm kidding. Stand with the writers. UPS.
Jarrett's stand up. Come on.
Listen, do y'all care or not?
Anyway, I just wanted to, update the people in live. Okay, so.
In live, 2 days in advance, later, but yes.
Well, they know what I mean. Anyway, okay. So, over the weekend, the Barbie movie premiered and made a bit of history, okay? The comedy, directed by Greta Gerwig and starring Margot Robbie, brought in $162 million its first weekend, which is a record, they say, for a woman-helmed film. Alongside the movie Oppenheimer, which brought in $82 million of its own, it was the fourth highest-selling box office opening weekend ever. Now, you made a joke earlier about this being Issa Rae's movie.
Oh.
And I think that was a great joke that I probably should have continued. But, nonetheless, here we are.
I have referenced this movie as the new Issa Rae movie since I first saw the first trailer. And, I told people I was going to go see the Issa Rae movie this weekend.
Well, the gag is, if you were trying to go see the Issa Rae movie, she's only in it for 5 minutes. Nonetheless.
If that... I was like, yes, for this Doubt performance, that's probably going to end up changing everything for her.
Yes! Come on, Doubt. I appreciate the reference. Thank you so much. Okay, so as y'all can see, Jared and I both saw Barbie, which has really become a zeitgeisty film. I feel like the movie is everywhere, right? The fact that it had that type of, box office weekend is proof of that in a lot of ways. The marketing is everywhere. People were dressing up to go to the bar. I went to see Barbie at 9:30 in the Merton, Jared, okay? And Miss Mamas was down the way in her pink sequence, okay? Ready to get in her dream house. Anyway.
I showed up to the movie theater and ran into some gays, and one of them had on pink. I was like, oh, are we here to see Barbie? And he was like, no, I'm here to see something else. And I was so disappointed.
Wow.
I was really let down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you dress up, Jarrett?
I got dressed, but I didn't wear pink. I didn't think about it until it was too late.
But you dressed up to go see the movie.
I mean, I put on an outfit. I went to the movies. I don't typically go to the movie theater, as we've discussed.
Okay, but hold on.
So but I was like, oh, I'm going out somewhere. I'm going to go do something. I got dressed, but no pink.
So you put on a nice outfit to go to the movies, but because it was Barbie or because it was just something you don't do normally?
Because I was going out to the movies with a friend. I felt like, oh, I should at least look like something.
Like a date?
No, it was not a date.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify the intention behind your dressing up. Anyway, let me get back to my intro because I ain't finished it yet. Okay.
I was gonna say, we ain't even got to the scripture yet, and we all in the notes.
So, okay, so Jared and I had some thoughts, okay, about the film itself, about the broader place in culture that it and Miss Barbie herself seem to have. And so we wanted to give it all the complex and complicado treatment here on the FANTI. We are maybe gonna try to be spoiler free, but also proceed at your own risk. Okay, so that's as much of a content one. That's what they call them. Not spoiler warning.
Content warning.
Spoiler alert.
You got it.
Spoiler alert. Yes, that is the word. Spoiler alert. Anyway, so Jared, to get us started, okay, I would like to know, were you one of the, young homosexuals who played with Barbies? Or was that not allowed in your home?
It wasn't that it wasn't allowed. I was not a Barbie homosexual. You
were an Oprah Winfrey homosexual.
Listen, okay? I was a Barbara Walters homosexual, okay? Barbie was never really part of my life as a kid. I mean, obviously you saw her on television and she's had the cultural impact that she's had over the 50 years or whatever it's been. But no, I wasn't really playing with Barbies. What about yourself?
Well, it might surprise people, but no, I was not a Barbie girl. I was not a doll person. And by doll, I want to be clear, I'm also talking about action figures because guess what? Birds of a feather flock together, okay? But I was not a doll person, but similarly, I feel like Barbie was always around. Barbie was the prototype, and then you had Bratz dolls, right? Which was supposed to be the younger, hipper, blacker version, right? And then you had the old school, the Cabbage Patch dolls, But my grandmother did have I forget the name of them, but they're these old school dolls that like black folks back in the day used to create for themselves, right, out of fabric, and like used to literally like sew the hair in it. I forget the like actual name of them, but my grandmother had one. Her name was Susie, right? And it was this doll that she had forever. I don't even know where Susie at now. I mean, my grandmother's no longer with us, so maybe Susie is no longer with us as well. I'm not sure. But she had this doll named Susie, and I would always, talk to Susie, like, hey girl, every time I went to my granny house, hey girl, how you doing? I wanted to make sure her hair was, falling the right way, because it was, it was yawn, and so you got to make sure it didn't get matted and stuff. Anyway, that is my experience with the whatchamacallit. But I wanted to say, I feel like the moment in my black ass life where Barbie became like a thing was when I first saw, I think it was Brandy got a Barbie. I want to say maybe it was around the time of Cinderella. My timeline might be a little off, but I remember Brandy getting a doll. I don't even know if it was an actual Barbie, to be clear, right? Because they got all them knockoff dolls as well. But I remember that and being like, oh, and I remember all the black folks was like, oh yeah, we gonna get our Brandy Barbie, 1999. But yeah.
Yeah, I've never had like that kind of connection to Barbie or to dolls. I mean, I had like some action figure toys or whatever, but like that was like the little people toys, I don't think was a bigger thing for me. I was definitely like cars, building things. Like I had Connects and Legos and all that type of shit because I liked building things with my hands.
Oh, use a Bob the Builder gay. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I grew up to be in interior design. Like, come on, we should have saw this coming.
Well, you could have been a paint swatch gay.
Oh, I was that too. Yeah, I was doing interior design in high school. Are you kidding? We did like a surprise reveal for my friend in high school. Me and her family like did a makeover in that day. Whole other thing. I was a different kind of kid. But what did you think about the movie?
What did I think about the movie? I thought it was fine.
You like, oh, Barbie.
Right. I thought it was fine. I wasn't blown away. It wasn't like a transformative, experience. I just was like, oh, that was cute. Like, I'm glad I saw it. I was entertained for the most part, but it wasn't like, I don't know what I was expecting. It's not a movie that I'll say it this way. It's not a movie that I'm running back to see, but I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. But I have heard other people say that like they're gonna go back and see it again, like they really, really loved it. And for me, it was just like, it was cute.
I can relate. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thought it was entertaining. Thought it was fun. I could see myself, leaving it on if I was flipping through the channels and it was halfway through on TV. Like, oh, this was fun. Like, I'm not going back to the movie theater to see it again. What I remember thinking, like, when it first started, that opening song from Lizzo, I think it's called Pink, and like we are seeing kind of like Barbie come to life in Margot Robbie. I remember thinking like, oh, and I leaned over to my friend who I was with and said like, oh, this feels like present day Legally Blonde, right? It feels like the beginning of a film franchise like that, where she is pink and blonde and like coming from one place into another, coming from like one era into another, or one kind of like lifestyle into another. And like, it felt like a franchise being built. And you said you didn't see it that way.
No, I get that you see it that way, to be clear. Right, because it has those elements, and let's be real, so many films, especially the films that are part of these like major properties, they're made right in a way to where they can pick up, and do another one, particularly if it's successful. But I guess for me, I was like, how do you recapture this particular moment in a way that would make another movie, as profitable because another movie is going to be more expensive because they're going to try to, ratchet everything up. And so I could see it. Once you said it, I could see that idea of the franchise ability, if you will, of this movie. But I don't think I want to see that personally. But again, I think I'm in the minority when it comes to the craze around it.
Yeah, I think that there's so many other stories I can tell. Like, the reason I was thinking that at the very beginning was because there's kind of like a Barbie universe, right? With all of these different characters, all of these different versions of Barbie. I think one of the things that was interesting to me and the friend that I was with, we both kind of like said to each other, like, I would love to see the script because all of the Barbies are named Barbie, right? And like hey Barbie, hey Barbie, hey Barbie, hey Ken, hey Ken, hey Ken, hey Ken. I was like curious about that, but I was also thinking about the ways that the Barbies, there's President Barbie, there's Dr. Barbie, there's Lawyer Barbie, there's Stereotypical Barbie, there's Barbie, 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 Barbie. And I was like, oh, there's got to be a lot of other interesting stories that could be told here if they came up with this. I also just appreciated Barbie's like level of self-awareness that I wasn't necessarily expecting. There was like an awareness of like her being dated and in some kind of ways irrelevant or not necessarily having as much relevance now as she did when she came out. But also like I appreciated that they talked about like this doll, this figure, this image, this message also has done harm, right? And like I just thought there was an interesting thing happening with like them telling this story of Barbie coming into the world and recognizing like that things were different and that she hadn't had the impact that she thought she did. And as I watched it, I was like, oh, stereotypical Barbie is white women, right? Like, or most of them, right? Like, I think stereotypical Barbie is what we saw white women going through in 2020 of being like, oh, I did this. Oh, I've had that impact on people. Oh, my words did that. Oh, my projections about beauty and a lot of that has come from men, right? But a lot of it has come from white women specifically. And I thought that Barbie was representative of what we saw from white women over the last few years. And it wasn't surprising that this kind of story would come out in 2023 in the way that it has.
I'm currently Googling one of the bits that you said a lot of this comes from men, right? And like that is something that the movie contends with about, initially, I guess, all of the board of directors or whatever of Mattel, the fictional Mattel in the movie, which I imagine is a, one of those self-aware skewers at the company itself earlier on in its time, but the entire board of directors is men. And I just Googled whether the current president of Mattel was a man, and it is a white one at that,
of course.
And the entire they do have one woman, two women, three women. They have three women on this executive leadership team. They're all white. Everybody's white, at least white passing at minimum, because sometimes they catch us. But I will note that the executive producer of Mattel Films, who I assume had, a hand in this movie coming to life is a woman. Robbie Brenner is her name. But still a whole lot of men directing this company. So that's interesting to say the least.
That kind of landed for me similarly to like when we've seen, stories about reproductive rights in Congress, when there are all of these people making decisions about over the years when we've seen women's rights happening in government and there was all men on the panel questioning maybe a handful of women. It kind of looked like that even in the way that they were laid out in that conference room. And I appreciated the self-awareness that we saw out of Barbie and out of even Mattel in some ways. I think this campaign, though, has been really a big talk of the industry. What did you think about that?
I mean, it was just pink everywhere. My God, today. And I love a little pink, as you can see now. But it was just, my God, pink, 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 pink. But I mean, that's like the geniusness of what they were able to do. And I was reading this story over at Variety about the marketing of the movie, and how, you know, a lot of folks have been saying that, like, oh, they must have broke the bank on the marketing, because even for the press junket, they, as you know, they do these press junkets in hotels, and they basically often, like, you know, rent out a floor of rooms or something like that, at these different hotels, and then they have the different talent like cycle through, you know, these different groups in different rooms or whatever. For the Barbie press junket, they had like basically remodeled an entire floor of a hotel. It was pink everywhere, like pink carpet, pink paint on all the walls, like the logo is all over. Like, you could tell they spent some money on that junket. You know what I mean? And so folks were just saying that, like, oh, y'all that the fact that the movie had this much attention and kind of zeitgeisty hold, folks were saying, was because of like a great marketing plan, and an expensive marketing plan. But the reality, at least according to this person, who I'm sure, you know, is likely fudging his words to make it seem like they, you know, really ate this as opposed to paying for it. But he was just like, you know, people will be surprised that, like, we didn't really go over budget, that like a lot of the visibility that you're seeing is just like earned media, right? It's just like, oh, the PlayStation people, right, really wanted to be a part of it, so they did a pink PlayStation, right? Or Crocs, or Flow from Progressive, or whatever. So there was this kind of broader happening ongoing. But I'm also thinking of Issa Rae. Issa Rae is one of the new models for Ivy Park, for the latest Ivy Park drop, and it's pink, you know? It's like perfectly timed right around this movie's premiere. And so that was interesting to me. But then, you know, the lucky thing, quote unquote, for Barbie was that, like, all of their marketing, their press interviews, and all of that was done before the strike, right? And so they were, even though we're in the middle of the strike, they were still able to benefit, I think, from, you know, interviews and people talking about the movie and whatnot, because the content had already been, you know, filmed. So I think that also contributed as well.
So can we talk a little bit about that? Because in the notes for our previous segment, we had the possibility of talking a little bit about scabbing, or during the strike, and what that looks like, what it means.
Oh,
Can you touch on what that would have looked like in this campaign particularly? Because for the folks that don't know, I guess you can't, for folks in SAG-AFTRA and in the writers, like, we are not supposed to be promoting our films, things that we've worked on or that are within our contracts. But can you talk about how that gray area kind of exists with influencers?
Right. So, like, there was this, like, back and forth online, I believe last week, maybe week before last at this point, as y'all are hearing this, in which there was, like, confusion around the role of, like, influencers specifically, but also, I would say, the role of critics and journalists as well. But I'm going to hyper-focus on the influencers, you know, specifically, about, like, you know, apparently a lot of studios were pivoting from, you know, because they wouldn't be able to use actors, right, to, you know, fan to the TV shows or to do interviews and on podcasts and all that other stuff as a part of the strike, that they were pivoting to influencers and trying to pay influencers, right, to do these, you know, sponsored posts and whatnot to continue, you know, the promo of a variety of movies, not just Barbie. And it seems like, I think the final decision that has come out on it is, like, if you signed a contract before the strike happened, fulfill your contract. But if you get approached after that point, that, like, if you accept, you know, a check to promote something by a studio that is part of the AMPTP, for a project, right, that is, you know, sponsored by the AMPTP, or was produced by, I should say, the AMPTP, the folks in the AMPTP. All of the big studios, for the most part, are including in here, that you would be scabbing if you accepted that opportunity and did it. And yeah, I mean, I don't do a lot of like paid sponsor post thingings. I've done a few for some of the studios, and I think I did some posts for Harlem on Amazon Prime earlier this year. I've probably done one or two others, but it became really interesting because now influencers, right, are accused of scabbing if they're, if they take on some of these gigs, which makes sense to me, to be clear. But it also just, what it does is it shows the ways that the strike will continue to have an outsized impact beyond just the folks who are on the picket line.
My feelings are really mixed about influencers not being able to do certain work. As a person who's in SAG-AFTRA, like, I stand with SAG-AFTRA and am in solidarity with our strike, even though I have a lot of challenges around it. But I'm also conflicted about it because I feel like SAG-AFTRA has, and influencers, there's an interesting dichotomy between screen actors and journalists and folks who would be in that union, and the way that influencers and social media talent are engaged. And so that's just interesting to me. I need to sit with it for a little bit longer to figure out where I land on it, but my feelings are really mixed about it, to be quite honest.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. If a studio would normally, right, have its actors who are starring in its projects, right, promoting the work, and the studios are refusing to come to the table or accept demands or whatever that language is around the strike, and their marketing team pivots or starts to focus on other ways to promote their movie and pay other people to do their work, it makes sense to me that it would be called scabbing. And yet also, again, this just goes to show the ways that the strike will continue to have an outsized impact. And I think it's slightly different for journalists now, right? Because the work that we do as critics, as reporters, as journalists, a lot of people see it as promo for films, and I get that, but it's not. Not always, perhaps, is a better way to say it. And I think it's that sliver of the conversation that I'm not sure where the John Q. Public has netted out on it, to be clear, but it's that slither that I'm like, if somebody is reporting or is writing a review of Barbie and they liked it, yes, it's promo for the film, but the intention behind it, I think, is a little bit different than, and I think this is a little bit what you're saying, the intent behind it is different than that of an influencer. And so it is different, but also, very murky and complex and complicated to me.
So SAG-AFTRA has influencer agreements and works with influencers on their deals and all that kind of stuff. So on one hand, I do understand expecting influencers to be in solidarity. I think that I think this strike stands to illuminate a lot of unforeseen issues the longer it goes on. I was saying to a friend recently.
Now we back on the strike. What happened to Barbie?
Well, no, I mean, as we're... What happened to Barbie? Well, I think Barbie is a great example of this, though, right? Because we saw that marketing campaign the way that we did, and knew that they had to get a lot of things done before the movie came out. But I also think about the ways that our work is supposed to be about zeitgeist and about what's happening in the world, and the idea that there's some things we can't talk about because that starts veering into the area of promotion or whatever. It's a very weird gray area. The last the last thing that I find, what's happening in your face?
I don't know. That articulation you just did there, it just did something to my spirit, but we can keep going.
I feel really weird about this, about the strike, the ways that we see it show up in Barbie, the way that we'll see it show up in other films that come out throughout later in the year. You and I were talking about films coming out later this year, right? Like, think about The Color Purple, for instance, that will be coming out at Christmas, which, you know, I'm curious to see how, if this is still going on by that point, because there are definitely estimations that say this could go through to the end of the year, how it starts to have impact on other communities, how it starts to have impact on our communities and the works that we're doing. Because as you talked about, like, I want to acknowledge that if we're talking about the strike and the way that we're seeing people stand up for it, there's also the algorithm, right? And the people that we tend to follow tend to be Blacker and more journalisty and those things in some ways, or more within the industry. But also, like, the fact that this is, a lot of this is happening on the backs of Black folks and Black folks' Black platforms and all those different things, but like will not end up benefiting us in the same ways longer term. That is the concern for me. And so when I think about the marketing campaign for a film like Barbie, I can't help but kind of think about those things. Last thing on my mind was the soundtrack. Like, the soundtrack itself isn't like extraordinary. Like, I'm playing all of these songs by any stretch of the imagination, but I did appreciate that this is like a legitimate soundtrack with, like, they brought in big artists to do songs that are on the radio that we're seeing out in the world. I don't love the music as much as I would like to, but like, I just kind of appreciate being able to see like a full-fledged soundtrack that is something like this.
Yeah, I mean, the music didn't do anything for me, so I'm you know, I know the Barbs are loving the work of a one Onika Mirage as part of this particular film, and I love that for them. But yeah, the music didn't really do anything for me. It was very, to be clear, I think it was very appropriate for the movie, right, and that world. But am I going to, you know, pop it up on, you know, the playlist? No.
So that's a great point. Like, in the movie, I was like, I didn't know Lizzo had like the first song, and like as it started, I was like, oh, that's Lizzo's voice. And then I like looked at the soundtrack later. I was like, oh, there's a lot of different artists on this soundtrack. And I remember thinking like, oh, I love me a Lizzo moment, and like tried to play it in the car yesterday as I was driving, and I was like, I don't think I need this. I don't think this is hitting for me in the way that I wanted it to.
I do. Before we get out of here and move to our next segment, I would be remiss, okay, if I did not speak the name, okay, all right, of
where's this going? The
prototype, okay, for doll movies, and that is the 2000 picture starring a one Tyra Banks and Lindsay Lohan.
Not Tyra Banks. Yes.
Entitled Life Size.
Which is actually appropriate as a reference because Life Size is even what this Barbie is.
Yeah, I know. Which is why I made the reference, friend. Thank you.
I was trying to help. You know, I know that I could tell you needed it.
Oh, wow. Me need help? Listen, a therapist listening right now is, yes, you need help.
Let's get out of here. We want to hear from y'all. What did you think about Barbie, about the strike, about all of the different things? Hit us up on social media using the hashtag FantiFam. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and the TikTok at Fanti Podcast. Coming up, we've had a lot of feedback from y'all since our feedback episode, and we're going to get into that in our dishonorable mentions next.
I'm Jordan Morris.
And I'm Jesse Thorne.
On Jordan Jesse Go, we make pure, delightful nonsense.
We rope in awesome guests
and bring them down to our level.
We get stupid with Judy Greer.
My friend Molly and I call it having the space weirds.
Patton Oswalt.
Could I get a Balrog burger and some Aragorn fries? Thank you.
And Kumail Nanjiani.
I've come back with cat toothbrushes, which is impossible to use.
Come get stupider with us at MaximumFun.org.
Look, your podcast app's already open. Just pull it out. Give Jordan Jesse Go a try.
Being smart is hard. Be dumb instead.
Oh, Russ, hey.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad I found you in line.
These clouds are really freaking me out.
I hate having to stand in line, and boy, what a line.
These giraffes do not smell good.
No, they do not, and they have such short necks.
But I'm hearing we need to get on this
We
ark.
gotta get on the ark. It
Yeah.
is about to rain. God is about to destroy humanity. Hey, oh, sorry. Are you Noah?
Yeah, I know we look like humans, but we're actually
Yes,
we're
totally.
podcasters.
We are podcasters, so it's different.
Have you heard of Ono, Ross, and Carrie?
We investigate spirituality, claims of the paranormal, stuff like that.
And you have a boat and say the world's going to end, so it seemed like something for us to check out.
We would love to be on the boat.
We came 2 by 2.
What do you think?
Ono, Ross, and Carrie, available on MaximumFun.org.
Welcome back, beautiful people. It is now time for our listener feedback segment. We are going to, Jarrett mentioned before the break that we are going to get into some of you all's responses to last week's episode. And guess what? Not this week. Well, y'all know the responses I'm talking about. Let me be specific. Y'all know the responses I'm talking about. From the well-meaning white people who wanted to, apologize for their white comrades' foolishness. And so we will do those, but we have with us another response from, I believe, that episode from one of our faves, okay, Dr. Diet. Take a listen to this voice memo.
I couldn't help but think that person who fired you up, Tre'vell, just needs a whole lot of trauma-informed therapy. And that doesn't change that when a comment like that, the anger that arises is partly stuff that's theirs that then they have successfully sort of put into you, which we call projective identification. But then there's also just the injustice of it, right? Like the righteous anger is the injustice of commentary that completely ignores the reality of the show and shows the deep unhappiness that person must have with themselves and their situation. And I would hazard a guess that their friendships are probably unfulfilling as well. And maybe they're the friend who will say, oh my God, I'm so excited for you, while they're simultaneously harboring a pound of jealousy that's going to come out in some toxic way, and then they lose their friend. Yeah, so I couldn't help but think, wow, that listener who gave the 1-star review needs a whole lot of freaking therapy.
We can always count on Dr. Diet to, say what needs to be said. And I should say, I wanted to play her voice memo, one, because she sent it, but also because, as I mentioned before we played it, a lot of the feedback that we got, particularly about that comment, so that got me hot, was from white people. Right, thanking us for our work, saying a variety of wonderful things, right? But Dr. Diet was one of the black folks who responded, and I also like the how do I say this? The clinical, the way that she's able to articulate what went down, right, in that situation, in a way that is, educated, and informed. I deeply appreciate that. And yes, we have reached out to Dr. Diet, offline, the producers have, and, we're gonna figure out, getting her on the show in due time. So stay tuned. Y'all know I make y'all wait for things, so just wait, but it'll happen.
I appreciated that she talked about what kind of friend that person probably is. That was actually really, really funny to me. And I thought, she's probably not wrong, right? Being able to kind of analyze their response to the show and being able to kind of have some perspective on who they might be was just interesting to me. So thank you, Dr. Diet. We'll have you on the show sometime soon. It's now time for our dishonorable mentions. These are the stories or people that caught our attention this week that either deserve a call out, either for their good or for their stupid. I want to give a dishonorable mention. We talked about having gone to see Barbie this weekend, and I had to download the Regal app to be able to buy the ticket because trying to buy it online wasn't working and all this other shit.
Okay.
Do you know that from that afternoon to the next morning, I had I think 5 or 6 emails from Regal. I think it was 5 emails from Regal. One about setting up my account, another about the movie, another about the ticket, another about the commemorative ticket, another about how do we do. And I was like, yo, companies that email too much, dishonorable mention, leave me the fuck alone. I just wanted to come see this movie. I did that. Get out of my inbox. And then when I unsubscribe, and I feel like I've mentioned this on the show before, when I unsubscribe, I don't need you to send me an email telling me that I've been unsubscribed. That's just petty. That's petty and infuriating. That's all I got.
I just have one honorable mention as well. I want to give a shout out to the folks over at GLAAD, and in particular their Communities of Color team. I mentioned earlier, actually I don't think I mentioned it, but Saturday evening, GLAAD held a private dinner thing called Creative Cusine. Their Communities of Color people held this dinner, which was just like, Black, queer, and trans creatives, and that's an expansive definition of creative, around a table, breaking bread, just like getting to know each other and chilling. But Ryan Mitchell and I, friend of the show, went to that event together. And we like to put on a look every now and again. And so when I got to his apartment and I got out of the Uber to go into his apartment, some beautiful Black queen who was about to pull off in her little putt-putt, she wind down her window. She said, I know that's right. You better be going to see Barbie. You better be going to see Barbie. Now, we weren't going to see Barbie, to be clear.
I love it.
But it was like, it's just another way that the Barbie of it all has become zeitgeisty. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the Communities of Color folks over at GLAAD for that wonderful room. They're working on a Black queer creative summit that'll happen later this year. And so I think the dinner was kind of an extension of the ideation and the work around that. So just wanted to shout them out. All right, now it's time for Black history is happening every day. This week, we're giving it to Shawamza Goff, who has been announced by the Biden administration to serve as director of the Office of Legislative Affairs, making her the first African-American woman in that role. For those who don't know what that role entails, like me, essentially Goff is appointed to push Biden's legislative agenda through Congress. Goff has been involved with the Biden administration for some time now, serving as deputy director of legislative affairs, where she's helped pass monumental bills such as the American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. Y'all know we don't do, I feel like we kind of do politics on this show. Actually, maybe we do politics on this show a lot more often than I'm thinking.
I was going to say, I would say we definitely do politics on this show. Have you been here?
But shout out to Shawamza. All right. Also, quick shout out to the Jacksonville's Jaguars coach, Kevin Maxon, who came out recently. He is now the first NFL coach to be openly queer. So we love that for him.
I feel like every time someone like this comes out, I always imagine their DMs are just like decimated, like just obliterated. So good for him.
Oh.
I just imagine like whenever someone in like a high profile.
You mean like with people flirting with him?
Absolutely. Whenever like someone is like the only queer person to come out, I imagine that gets very interesting for them. So I'm curious what that experience has been like.
Well, he's got a boyfriend, he's got a partner, so.
And to who?
Well, that's y'all problem now.
I'm saying that I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the girls. Honey, the girls be out here. They don't give two shits about who you got at home. Anyway, moving on.
My God, today.
We thank y'all so much for listening. They don't. Am I lying? Am I lying?
I don't know nothing about that life, okay?
Am I wrong? Anyway, we thank y'all so much for listening. Before we go, we want to remind you that we've got a couple of things for you to check out. Historically Black Phrases, our new book that will be in stores on September 19th, is available right now for pre-order. Go to historicallyblackphrases.com for more information on where to buy it and get a signed copy or pre-ordered or whatever it is.
Last week, Jared and I recorded the audiobook for Historically Black Phrases.
Oh, yes.
Maybe by the time that you all hear this episode, I will have posted my recap video, or maybe not. Either way, stay tuned to the socials if you would like to check that out.
I'm remembering now because we taped our first day of recording was the day we taped the last episode, the most recent episode, the What Was Said. Mm-hmm. And I remember leaving home being irritated because the episode, I was annoyed with some of the feedback that we'd had, and I was like, oh, I need to get my energy together because we have a book to read. And it was a lot of fun. I distinctly remember you pulling out the camera in moments when you thought I might cry, which...
For the record, that was not the only time I pulled out the camera. Mm-hmm. It was just the time, that was just the times that you recognized, okay, that I was recording you.
Oh, no, I saw the camera. We were definitely filming each other quite a bit, across the studio from each other, recording the book. We've put out a couple of videos and stories, but we'll have some more content for that.
Yes.
But yes, we definitely had to stop down because I started crying at the end, and I felt bad about that, but it is what it is. So yes, go to historicallyblackphrases.com to pre-order the book and get it. Also, the audiobook is now going to be available, obviously, so you can pre-order on your digital apps or your Kindle or whatever you have.
Absolutely.
Also, We See Each Other, the podcast, is fully available right now. All of the episodes are online. We See Each Other, the podcast, wherever you get your streaming apps and your streaming of podcasts. Go check out all those episodes, co-hosted by a friend of our show, Shar Jossel. And We See Each Other, the book, is also available right now wherever you get your books. Go and get it.
And we should let you all know that for the month of August, Jared and I will be taking some time away. We both have separate moments that we're taking for ourselves to recharge. We're working on some things for you all in the meantime. There will still be episodes that we drop into the feed, so don't worry. You'll still get our wondrousness, into the feed. But we're also, us and the team, we're working on some things. We told y'all about swimming. Just know it's happening.
Well, I mean, and to some degree, it has happened. So,
yes,
we did our first lesson a couple of weeks ago. As we're taping this on Tuesday, we have another lesson tomorrow. And I will say, it's been a lot more fun than I expected. So when we come back from break at the end of August, we will have a full thing around our swimming adventures. We will tell you if we were swimming on vacation or on our breaks and all that good stuff.
No.
I mean, we gonna see. We got some more time, but
likely not, but we'll see.
I'm okay, this is actually working. This might happen.
Okay, Michael Phelps.
We were both concerned about putting our heads underwater. Oh, I didn't say all that now. There ain't gonna be no Wheaties box situation. But I was impressed with both of us, getting our
yes,
we'll talk about that when we come back. Yes, we're gonna be gone for the next couple of weeks. When we come back, we've got our swimming extravaganza and some fun interviews and conversations around that. If you are just checking us out on YouTube for the very first time, we ask that you go to fantipodcast.com. We've got 4 seasons of fantastic shows. Only this most recent season, and season 4, is on YouTube, but we got 3 seasons of content that you may not have seen. If you have a comment or suggestion about this week's show, you got some different ways that you can hit us up. You can email us, fanti@maximumfun.org, or you can hit us on the social medias at Fanti Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and the TikTok machine. Use the hashtag FantiFam.
Oh, yes, and as always, if you'd like to support the work that we do here at Fanti, put your money where your mouth is and become a member of the Maximum Fun family, okay? You can do that by going to MaximumFun.org/join. Our music, as always, is brought to you by the one and only Corice, COR.ECE, wherever you get wonderful music. Our graphics by Ashley Wynn and the folks over at Moonhouse Creative. Our editor is Anne-Marie Huber. Happy belated birthday to Anne-Marie Huber.
Yes.
And then our producer is Palmira Muniz.
Our senior producer is Laura Swisher. This is a production of Maximum Fun.